The Projection Booth podcast is sponsored by Scarecrow Video. Try out Scarecrow's rent-by-mail service, choose from over 150,000 films, and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door. Visit scarecrow.com today.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Two men on opposite sides of the law. Ryan O'Neal, Bruce Dern, and between them, Isabella Adjani. Three loners playing a ruthless game none of them could afford to lose. In The Driver. Ryan O'Neal is the driver.
My line of work is kind of hard to come by.
His reputation, the best wheelman in the city.
His memory's not too good about last night. Yeah, you can do better than that.
I don't have to.
Did you ever get caught on one of your jobs?
Hasn't happened yet.
Bruce Dern is the detective.
I'm very good at what I do.
His reputation, the toughest cop in the city.
You saw the man who was driving the car, yet you didn't identify him. You got a reason?
I just don't like you.
Now you get out of my town, because you go out on one more job, and I'm gonna nail you.
You might be getting too big.
Two men driven by their need to prove they were the best.
How are you gonna get downstairs?
I really like chasing you.
Sounds like you got a problem.
I'm much better at this game than you are. Now you win, you make some money. I win, you're gonna do 15 years.
To them, the money, the law, even their lives no longer count.
We don't care about the money.
Might even send it to him.
Who was best was all that mattered.
This is the quiet part of the hunt. Trap's all set. Cowboy's out there somewhere. You've been set up, you know.
To break the cop, the driver was willing to risk it all. To break the driver, the cop was willing to break the law.
Go ahead, draw it! It'll cost you 2 years.
Ryan O'Neal, Bruce Dern, Isabella Adjani, The Driver, a ruthless game between two legends.
Welcome to the Projection Booth. I'm your host, Mike White. Joining me once again is Ms. Beth Accomando.
Hello, thank you.
Also back in the booth is Mr. Walter Chaw.
Thank you so much for having me.
We kick off Noirvember 2025 with a look at Walter Hill's The Driver. Released in 1978, the film stars Ryan O'Neal as the titular driver, getaway driver that is. If he were younger, you could call him a baby driver. He's pursued by the detective, played by Bruce Dern, and if you can't tell by these character names, the film is a stripped-down thriller that plays with some familiar archetypes, including some that may feel very familiar if you're a fan of Jean-Pierre Melville's Les Samouraï. We will be spoiling the film as we go along, so if you don't want anything ruined, please turn off the podcast and come back after you've seen the film. We will still be here. So, Beth, when was the first time you saw The Driver, and what did you think?
I have a terrible memory for the first time I see a lot of films, but I do remember being a big fan of Walter Hill around that time frame, and I feel like I saw The Long Riders before I saw The Driver, but I remember really liking it, and a lot of my film memories are tied to my dad, who's the one who got me to really love cinema. And I feel like the first time I saw it, I think I was still a teenager and not quite understanding it. And I remember talking to my dad about how the film was these archetypes as opposed to real characters, because my dad always liked to make me think more about films that I was watching, never answering my questions, but prompting me to think about it more. That's what I remember is the first time seeing it, being a little bit confused by it, but being a fan of Walter Hill and being a huge fan of just action films. And I just felt like it felt fresh and new and different. I've since put it into a slightly different context, seeing like Jean-Pierre Melville's work, like you mentioned. But when I saw it, that was the first thing.
And Walter, how about yourself?
First time I saw it, I think it's got to be on VHS. I think I came to it backwards through The Warriors and Streets of Fire. I was so enamored. Those were more kind of my friend group, this vibe. We really loved Warriors. We loved Streets of Fire. Just when I became more aware that there was an active hand behind some of these movies, and you start to work backwards and forwards. I think most of us did in the pre-internet age, right? We started to look at the credits and start wondering about these people. And The Driver was one of the first movies I was really actively searching for at local video stores and stuff. It was difficult in my small town in Colorado to find for a while, but I think I finally did. If I recall, at Video Plus, the late lamented Video Plus, had a copy of The Driver. So I remember renting it and being disappointed that it wasn't The Warriors over Streets of Fire. Something very, an animal that was really different. And it wasn't for years later that I came back to it with a different kind of expectation. With no expectation, really, just to say. I was really little. I didn't get it. I was 12 or 13. I wanted street fights. I wanted guys in baseball uniforms. I don't know, something different. 48 Hours I wanted even. And it wasn't any of those things. I think the second time was really when I began to appreciate it as a kind of its own animal. But the first time I saw it would have been on a pretty crappy VHS, and I was not nearly ready for it.
This was actually a first-time watch for me for this episode. When we had you on the show, I think it was, last year I think you were on before, Walter? Obviously, you've got the book about Walter Hill that you wrote, and I was just like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. Let's get him on and talk about a movie that I've always wanted to see, but never have. Because, yeah, I'm a fan of Walter Hill. We've done so many Walter Hill films on this program. We've talked about The Getaway, we've talked about Hickey and Boggs, Streets of Fire, The Warriors. I can't even remember what all else we've discussed, but just I had this blind spot of The Driver, even though I think I've got a screenplay that I printed out forever ago and just always wanted to get into this film and never did. So I use this as an opportunity to say, okay, if I'm going to talk about this movie, I want to talk about it with two people that I really enjoy their opinions. So let's check it out.
That's great. What's your first reaction to it?
My first reaction is that I love this whole idea of this stripped down narrative. I can really see the Samouraï influence on there. The whole idea, mostly at the beginning, especially when it comes to the Isabella Adjani character and the way that she sees Ryan O'Neal. And I know we'll talk about how the original screenplay played out, that it wasn't a coincidence that she sees Ryan O'Neal, but she becomes one of the few witnesses to see him, very much like the singer, from Les Samouraï, as well as Jenny from The Killer, and the way that she can be the person that puts the finger on him. And just the way that this movie plays with this very cool color palette, and also the minimal dialogue that it has. I'm trying to think, it's 15 minutes into the movie before Ryan O'Neal even says anything. And there's very little dialogue. And then, of course, I love Bruce Dern. And seeing Bruce Dern in this era, especially, anytime I see Bruce Dern, I'm super happy. But 1970s Bruce Dern, fuck yes, I am there for it. And I just really like him in this movie, and especially him and Matt Clark and their chemistry. And then Joseph Walsh, who I've talked with Joseph Walsh for hours and hours, but mostly about California Split. I never brought up The Driver, which makes me feel pretty guilty, but it was so nice to see him in here in such a prominent role.
And Bruce Dern wasn't the first choice for this film. It was Robert Mitchum. Hill actually went over to Mitchum's office, I guess it was, and he describes it as there's two chairs with a small refrigerator in between. And they sat down, and Mitchum pulled out a bottle of vodka from the refrigerator, and this is 11 in the morning here. But he describes his long day spent with Mitchum and a bottle of vodka. And then the next day, Mitchum calls up and says, nah. And that was it. He was initially considered, and you can imagine what a different kind of movie that would have been without Dern's snaky reptilian insinuation, which I think is perfect for the detective.
Dern can play a dirty cop like nobody's business. I love The Laughing Policeman, which one of these days I'm going to cover on this show. And I just feel that he's racist, he's sexist, he plant evidence. And basically he's very similar in this movie insofar as he will do whatever it takes to catch the driver. And I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate that I don't know if we ever really see him in a police station.
No,
we mostly see him.
Don't.
We see him at Torchy's, and I'm just waiting for Peter Jason to be running the bar back there and for Eddie Murphy to come walking in saying, there's a new sheriff in town.
I was so surprised because I haven't seen it in a long time. And there are no police station shots at all. His office is in that truck and in the bar. And it's interesting because on a certain level, it's like he's never in his real environment of his job, but he's in his real environment of how he sees himself. He's this player out on the streets. Or the thing about Bruce Dern, I love him, but he's an actor who, in most of his films, I always find that he could have played both roles. He could have done a kick-ass job playing the driver. I especially thought of that when I was watching Coming Home. I kept thinking, like, man, might have been better if him switched places, but he's a great actor. I love watching him.
Yeah, Ryan O'Neal's an interesting choice. I know that Hill really wanted Steve McQueen to play this role. I was listening to the commentary that Matthew Asprey Greer put together for I think it's the Imprint disc, and talking about how O'Neal's career was a little bit on the waning side at this point. He had done Nickelodeon, which really wasn't that big. He was huge in the earlier part of the decade. By 1978, you're on the downswing already. This seems so quick, but I guess stuff just moved pretty fast. And I think it's an interesting choice to have this pretty boy actor playing this role. And I like that he is so pretty that, and I'm sorry to use that word, but whenever I look at him, he's such a beautiful man. And you would think that he would be more like hard scrabble, like even Burt Reynolds or something in this role would seem more fitting. But I like that he's playing against type. And I guess really when you look at somebody, and we'll talk about this later on in the show, but you look like a Ryan Gosling, very similar so far as very pretty man in this role as this silent, stoic driver.
There's something about the John Ireland to him, or I won't say Monty Clift because he was a great actor, but there's something about the sort of gentleman cowboy feeling about it. If you look at The Driver as a Western, which is why I did like Ryan O'Neal in that role, because he's such a cipher, really, as a human being and as an actor, I think. There's a real blankness to him that could be sociopathic, possibly. He had worked with Hill before in a TV movie called The Thief Who Came to Dinner, and Hill had written the screenplay for that. It's really interesting to see the similarities between those two performances. They're both like the Thornhill character, North by Northwest, go as the wind goes. There's not really a set identity for them necessarily. And whatever's happening around them seems to imprint and get filtered through them. I think Ryan O'Neal's great movies are because he's got great co-stars. There's something about him like Open Milk and Refrigerator or something. He takes on the flavor of whatever's most prominent in the building. And here he couldn't be more different from McQueen, to both your points, I think, because McQueen is such a dyed-in-the-wool sort of character. He is who he is, what he is. But for O'Neal, I think he really fits in with this unknowable, archetypal, maybe even thing. And in a movie that's aspiring towards a Western archetype, I think kind of works. For Hill to use him twice, I think he engenders a lot of loyalty, but also I think he's got a pretty good eye for that sort of masculinity, all the different kinds of masculinity that he covers in turn in each of his films.
Ryan O'Neal wanted the part too, because I think he was feeling his career, I don't know, like waning, but I think he was feeling tired of that sort of typecasting that he was getting. He was getting all the same roles. And I think he saw this as a chance to do something different. And if you consider that the Samouraï was an influence, he's a pretty boy just like Alain Delon. They're both these like beautiful faces that the camera loves that can be just this kind of blank slate. You can also say that about Greta Garbo. They always joke that, what were you thinking about when you were shooting that scene? And it was like nothing. She was just this gorgeous face that whatever you cut to, you could read whatever you wanted into her. And so I think the only moment where I felt that he wasn't the right guy was when he beats up that thug. That was the only time when I'm going like, maybe not. I'm not sure he would like really take that guy out. But other than that, I think he worked really well in this context.
I really love that comparison to Alain Delon because lately I like Samurai a lot as almost more as a comedy, like an existential comedy, because he's such a bad assassin. There's like 30 witnesses. He doesn't really care. He does care how his hat looks, though. He does care if his collar is just perfectly ironed. He's just very aware of his beauty. And I think there's something about Melville that was talking about referencing that as a trope, I think, in some of these movies. And yeah, I think O'Neill is that kind of character as well. And the only minor pushback I'd give to the beating up the thug scene is that I think people who have like Mark Wahlberg, who have no interior life, are really scary when they get violent. Because they seem like the sharks, what was that Quint says, their eyes roll back to black and then the screaming starts. I feel like that with some of these actors that don't really have, it seems like, any kind of hamster spinning around the wheel. So when they start beating, there's something to me that feels really serial killer about that. I can't reason with this thing. There's no mercy here. They've just started down this road and they're going to continue down the road just because I can't really read them. So I'm not really arguing with you. I'm just saying it worked for me because the scariest people in film for me are not the Hannibal Lecters. You can engage him in a conversation about bar talk or something. Ryan O'Neill, what are you going to talk to him about? He's just there to kill you. So there's something about that's scary to me too. They can't reason with him. There's no talking to him. If he's showing up to your meeting angry, he's leaving angry. He's programmed. And there's something about that I think is interesting in a film that's this programmatic.
He's so fatalistic as well because he knows that he's being set up. That's how I read this movie, is that he absolutely 100% knows, even when Glasses first approaches him and he basically murders the car in the parking garage. That to me was him just showing, like, I know what you guys are up to. I'm going to ruin your car. And then when he takes the job later on, it's basically, yeah, I know what's going to happen with this thing, but I have to have, like you're saying, is if this were a Western, I have to have this showdown. I've been on the sidelines. I've been ducking Black Bart for this whole time. I need to man up. And I'm not sure if he's actually a white hat or a black hat, because I don't feel that either of these guys they're both gray hats to me, both very morally ambiguous. But I just feel like, okay, this is the time I need to make sure that I face off with Bruce Dern, with this detective.
Talking about showdown, it's like a showdown of egos. Like they each think they're the best. And the only way to prove it is to play this game where I know what you're doing, but I can still beat you at this, or I'm going to trap you. But it feels very much like it's all about their egos. And that's why, like, Isabella Adjani can just walk away at the end. It's not about her. It's about the two of them, like, having this fight.
It's his finishing move. It's Ryan O'Neill's, the driver's finishing move, where he plays chicken twice in this movie and he wins both times. He plays it against the cops at the beginning. They both separate and crash. And then later on, when he's going against Glasses and his driver, does it again. Sure enough, there's a crash. He will not blink. And I appreciate him for that.
See, that's the part of the sociopath psychic guy that I do believe that he pulls off well for me. The punch did not land right for me. But that sense of I'm not going to blink in this chicken fight, that I totally believed and thought he did really well, because it's like it doesn't even faze him at all. He knows he's going to win because other people are more human and will try to save themselves and pull aside.
Yeah, there's that sense of fatalism there too, I think, where I'm not sure that he knows that he'll win. I don't trust that he cares or that he's aware of the consequences. I don't trust that he's aware of consequences, which is a strange, I guess, thing to say. And I think part of the effectiveness of that film for me is that the driver is so ambiguous, but also so scary. He reminds me of all these Western villains from Martin Landau all the way through Lee Marvin who show up and you feel like, I don't know if they know the damage that they're doing. I don't know that they have thought through the preciousness of the lives that they're taking, all this sort of liberal crap that I've been indoctrinated with. But watching these movies, that was what was the horror of those people. And to find it in Hero for me is one of those things that only later, as I got a little older, into college and more existential, that I really truly appreciate. I think watching this movie first when I was really young and looking for that black and white hero villain thing, which really is there in Warriors and Streets of Fire in 48 Hours, that you see this obviously supposed to be the hero, and yet, oh boy, I don't know. It's hard to like him. He's not eloquent. He's not charming. He's not warm at all. He doesn't seem to feel fear. It's just something scary and about him. And I think part of the allure of The Driver now is a cult object, it seems like, because it really didn't do well at the time. Part of that, I think, is that there's this chilliness about it. There's no exit kind of feeling about it, where they're just engaged in this cycle of violence and the set roles that they're trapped in, encased in their lives, and they can't ever break out of the cycle of the stuff that they're doing. The characters who can, like the player, like Isabelle Adjani's player, are almost supernatural. She knows more than she should at all times. She is able to move in and out of the action. Everyone else is trapped. Look at Glasses, for God's sake. All these people are trapped in these. They cannot get out of these. We're trapped there by their own design or by the design of what their makeup is. There's something like Waiting for Godot about it, that you were just stuck here and there's nowhere for you to go. And you're trapped in these roles that you're forced to enact over and over again, especially in our culture, in our media culture. These are the same roles that you're cast in and you're forced to reenact over and over again. There's something about that, yeah.
Not to jump to the end, but there's no resolution. This will continue to go on, it feels like. When at the end of this movie, that bag is empty. There is no money. There is no winner. They just walk away, and what's going to happen the next day? I don't see Ryan O'Neal turning over a new leaf. I don't see Bruce Dern not being obsessed about Ryan O'Neal anymore. I just see them going their own separate ways and then starting again the next day. It's like that whole the sheepdog and the coyote thing from the Warner Brothers cartoon.
Hello, Ralph. Hello, Fred.
Clocking in kind of thing, and then off they go again, because I can see maybe why audiences were like, what the hell? Dies, nobody wins, nobody goes away with the girl. You've got this beautiful Isabelle Adjani in her first American role, and she just walks away. Yeah, she's a complete cipher as well. You don't get to know her at all. And I'm really glad. So I did read the script of this, and I'm really glad that they cut out that first scene where you have the Ronnie Blakely character, the connection, who's at the heart of all this stuff. She's meeting with the player, the Johnny character, and basically giving her money. And like this whole thing is almost like a setup. And so when she sees Ryan O'Neal, and if you know that, then it plays that scene a little bit different as far as her looking at O'Neal, O'Neal looking at her, and then the lineup scene plays a little bit differently as well. And I'm so glad that they cut that out, because that just would have not done this movie any favors whatsoever.
It would be early on in the film telling you something and removing any sense of ambiguity or interest. And it also doesn't make a whole lot of sense either to me. Like, it makes much more sense the way it plays out this way. And it seems more true to the style of what the film is. When I heard about the scenes that were in there, I was like, oh my God, thank God they cut that out.
I don't believe he was interested in making sense, really. We just wrote anathema to American film since forever. But he said in an interview that he didn't want a realistic depiction of what real criminals are like. I didn't want a realistic depiction of what the city was like. He wasn't interested in any of that.
And that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, it becomes a metaphor, but for what? It becomes a symbol, but for a passion play. But for what? So that's the question that holds interest, I think, over all this time, that this is a deeply symbolic, a deeply metaphorical film. But what? Is it for the politicians that go in every day and say horrible stuff, and then they clock out and they have dinner with their opposition that they've just been slandering on TV? It's just a game, except lives are at stake. Real issues are at stake, and these guys are playing some kind of game here. Is what it more and more, as I just watched it recently in preparation for tonight, I just felt like, boy, this feels like watching television accidentally for a while, watching C-SPAN or something. Boy, it really feels like these people are just engaged in their own micro drama and not realizing that they're actually influencing the world with the decisions that they're making here. Just because they have to show up and say the right things in front of the camera, the stiltedness of it, strange staccato-ness of the dialogue and the roles, again, to me, becomes increasingly poignant as this is who we are. This is actually what's happening now. We have to pretend that we're still okay. We have to pretend that we're playing the rules the same that we've always played them, but really we're just trapped in these rules. And we have an awareness that there's like a immense darkness looming. I sound like a crackpot, but our job is to play this role and to enact in these same cycles and act like everything is okay. And that's what we do, while these other people who are in control do the same thing. And then we clock out and I don't know. So there's something about The Driver that to me has now become larger than a genre film. It's like an existentialist play to me.
Well, and I can see why it was not accepted in America, but lauded by more European critics. This feels like a European film that escaped to America somehow. I can't even say it feels like a remake of a French film because it doesn't. It feels like a French film instead of a remake of a French film. It feels very true to that idea because the script is so stripped down and told in very sparse dialogue, sparse directions. I know that Hill described it as writing haiku. I don't know if I necessarily see it like that, but it is very minimalist to find that he even hacked a bunch of stuff out of that. I've talked about scripts before where it feels like when you're watching the movie, all of the connecting tissue is gone, but I'm glad the connecting tissue is gone. I'm glad that it is so enigmatic. It just adds to the experience of things because we see Ryan O'Neal where he lives and it is super sparse, like no personal effects or anything. And then there's a scene where they visit where Bruce Dern lives. And I think they say, oh, your place looks just like the Cowboys or the Drivers. And I like how they call him Cowboy as well. And it's, yeah, like it's that whole Danny Lee, Chow Yun-Fat thing of the two sides of the coin, the Batman Joker thing where it's like, okay, which one came first kind of thing. And is he that way because the driver's that way? Or are they just both so similar that they both live in like squalor, like no personal effects? They just have their one job. I'm the driver. I'm the detective.
And back again to Beth's point about like Samouraï, you remember Alan Dalone's apartment and that is empty except for a bed, a table, and a parakeet, who's his best friend, you know, and actually tells him that he's being bugged at one point, I think, in that movie. I love that movie. Very funny. But yeah, there's emptiness.
I'm also curious if he put that stuff in the script to get it approved by the studios. Like, I wonder if there was stuff in there that he knew in his head he was going to cut because it didn't really fit the rest of the film, because so much of that is so well written and stripped down, and those scenes feel very out of place in what that final film is. So I'm just curious if maybe he put that in as decoy. Let the studio have a little more conventional narrative, a little more explanation, a little more exposition, and then we'll just cut it out.
Yeah, very possibly. And for his cast as well, to give them a little bit of direction. That's interesting. He stated about The Driver that he wrote it essentially as a reaction against regular stuff and making a career out of writing for a while now. At that point, he was like, I just didn't want to do the same stuff again. So for the same stuff to show up in there, to your point, to end up being cut, really interesting. Yeah, I think probably you have something there. Durney here's got to know what he's doing. So here's a little background, but when we're shooting, we're not shooting any of this stuff. The better, again, yeah.
There is almost always a moment when Bruce Dern sounds like he was raised in Ireland, where he will add a little Irish to his affect. There's one part, it's when he dumps the coffee on Ryan O'Neal's hands, and Ryan O'Neal's about to punch him. He's just like,
Go ahead, throw it. It'll cost you 2 years. Go on. You want to throw it? Go on. Go on. Go on. Now, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to catch the cowboy that's never been caught. Cowboy desperado.
What are you talking? What's going on here, Bruce? You're not in Ireland. You're somewhere in Los Angeles in the back streets. Or at that moment, you're at Torchy's doing a police lineup, and the bartenders are behind him just polishing glasses like Sam Malone. I'm like, all right, great.
It's funny, Torchy shows up in a lot of his movies. That's also the name of the bar in 40 Hours in Streets of Fire as well. Torchy's is the name of Raven's bar. that he hangs out in. It's just the name, I guess.
It's his Valverde.
That's right. His Yaknaktafa County.
I just wanted to get back to one point you made, Mike, where you were talking about it felt like this French film that, landed here. To me, what's interesting about it, it's the same thing that kind of happens with Westerns and Akira Kurosawa and Sergio Leone. I feel like it's something American that got exported and reinterpreted in France and then came back over and got reinterpreted. So it's got these layers of translation, and each time it gets translated, it like picks up some slightly different flavor or tone or texture. And I think that's why it's interesting, because it's not quite Le Samouraï, but it's not quite the action films that came before in the United States, and it's not quite anything else at that point. So it feels like it's just been translated a few times. And
well, to throw another wrench in it, the movie that Hill is actually obsessed with is John Woo's The Killer, like a remake of Samurai, right? So to your point again, there's another,
and he wanted to remake that for America.
He does, and he has a script written for it in English, ready to go.
And a lot of that felt like it was taking from Rio Bravo to me.
That's
it almost
true.
felt like he was taking Le Samurai into The Killer and adding more of a Western flavor. But he kind of was doing that whole thing that you're talking about, Beth, with the echoes. He would kind of re-echo everything into Last Man Standing. And this is more of a pure vision of Red Harvest or something, but to me it's the worst version. I think there's a version with David Carradine that I think is an actual better version of Yojimbo and Fistful of Dollars than Last Man Standing. Nobody gets blasted off of trampolines and shot through windows or anything.
See, I actually love that. I think there are two different kinds of Walter Hill action film, right? There's the kind where it looks like people are actually fighting and learn how to fight, and then there's that kind with Streets of Fire where Michael Pare swings a mop, I think, at one point, and someone goes flying through the window. Yeah, there's a real comic bookness to some of Hill's films. Those are the two things that he always loved, were Westerns and comic books. And he wanted to be a comic book artist. He went to Mexico to study that. But yeah, there's two different kinds. And Michael Pare in Streets of Fire was like, told Hill that he's going to go take boxing lessons so he knew how to fight. And Hill said, absolutely not. This is not that kind of movie. You should not know how to fight. You should swing like a big roundhouse telegraph swing, and you're going to hit some guy, and he's going to go through a door, across the street, through a window. That's the kind of movie that we're making here. But there are other movies that are very much about fighting and knowing how to fight, I would say. It's ahead of that. Or even Full 48 Hours is a very interesting fight film. They both show a lot of character through the way that they fight each other. But yeah, I think in my defense of Last Man Standing, it's a really wonderful Prohibition-era comic book take on all of that stuff. For the driver, I think, to Ryan O'Neal's punch, I don't think he's aspiring towards realism here. What he's really wanting is not for them to be able to ever express themselves verbally, but only through cars. It's almost like a Cronenberg film in that way, or something where all of the physicality of the film is really through the manipulation of metal and the screeching and the screaming of metal. When he's trying to show Glasses his disdain for being undervalued, they destroy his car. He destroys his car in this amazing garage sequence. It's this, rather than telling him off in this eloquently penned speech, he's just like, I'm going to knock off every door on your car one by one. I'm taking the wings off a fly. I'm going to show my disdain for you through the destruction of this metal. And so the screeching of it and the torturedness of it and the idea that we're in bus stations and rail yards and all these places, there's something very brutalist about, I think, the way that this film is told as well. Again, not in a realistic way, but in a very metaphorical way, even about our history as an industrial nation, perhaps. And not to get too deep in the woods, but there's something about that.
It's also him just showing how skilled he is, too, because he doesn't just smash the car. He, piece by piece, very carefully, one side, one other side, one fender, the next fender. I can do this exactly how I want to. And it's, again, it's a bit of ego. And to put my 2 cents in on Last Man Standing, that is his heroic bloodshed film. So, all that excess and over the top is perfectly suited to that particular style, I think.
I love, speaking of the use of the cars, when, I'm trying to remember exactly when it is in the film when Ryan O'Neal is driving through, I want to say it's another parking garage, but it's like he's sneaking in the car. It's almost like as if he were like crawling or just like looking around corners, but it's the car doing it. It's not him, but it's him as an extension of the car. And I want to say that Dern's doing something very similar as well. And it's just like these two men just going around corners, but in these vehicles and just sussing each other out. I just really love that he is so identified with the cars. And the other thing too, going back to John Woo, and the color palette of the Samouraï is so distinct, and the color palette of Un Flic is so distinct as well. And I absolutely love the cinematography that is coming in this movie. And just that it's the same gentleman, Phil Lathrop, who did Point Blank, which is, to me, one of the best looking movies pretty much ever. It looks so good. And I just love the coolness of the colors. I love that amazing shot of Walker going down the airport corridor, and you just hear the shoes and see him coming, and the whole thing of him busting through the door, and the gray suit that he's got on, or all the gangsters with those different shades of green. You get so much of this, especially in some of these outdoor scenes where they have these chases where the world is green. There's an amazing shot when O'Neal finally confronts Adjani after the lineup scene, and it's a corridor kind of thing, and it's lit up at the bottom, it looks like, with green neon. It just casts a shade over everything, and you see these two elevators in the background, like outside of the building type elevators going up and down, and you just see these little red lights going up and down. It just looks so good, and everything looks so cool and controlled with this film, very much like the characters.
And then the city looks gorgeous too. Even when they're having the car chases and seeing the neon and the lights of the city whiz by when they're taking the curves and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think LA looks like this anymore. There's something very time capsule about this as well. There's wonderful movies during the no wave period in New York where you really get a feeling for it. This is the LA version of that, I think. And Lathrop, he did Hill's first movie too, Hard Times, and he also worked with him on Thief Who Came to Dinner. But I'm not sure there are a lot of cinematographers who are better at shooting with low light like this, bouncing light off the streets, using neon and all those things to do it. Hill would recapture a lot of that, I think, for the Warriors. But just the way to shoot at night, it's really LA noir, quintessentially LA noir, right? When we think about that, is, man, this is a really beautiful film. What a great comment. I love talking about his use of cars and the extension of cars and tying it with brilliant observation about heroic bloodshed and last standing. Thank you for that. John does that as well in his Mission Impossible movie. There's that sort of tango that Tom Cruise's character has on the back of it, on motorcycles. They're actually expressing this, and also through the cars. And he does that, of course, with Hard Boiled, with motorcycles and cars too. And there's a real like marriage of man and metal theme or trope or whatever going on here. But yeah, Lathrop is to be commended for a lot of that. Really beautiful stuff. He also shot They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Oh
yeah, another Bruce Dern classic.
Yeah,
just really beautiful films, just gorgeous looking movies, right? But yeah, it's always smart, I think, for young filmmakers to attach themselves to veteran cinematographers for their first couple times out. It really helps ease the transition, I think.
Yeah, to think that this was Hill's second directorial effort is just amazing. And I do love that he says about the Warriors, thank God I was making the Warriors because this movie tanked.
The Driver is the kind of movie that's so experimental and unusual that it ends careers pretty quickly in the United States. It's very possible that if he didn't have Warriors in the chamber already and was actually shooting it, that we wouldn't have had a Walter Hill, not in the way that we do now. I think he'd already maybe sold the script for Alien as well. At that point, he had started Brandywine with David Tyler. He already luckily had some really soft landings because The Driver was just even Isabella Adjani came out afterwards saying that she was betrayed. She was told that it was going to be an American action movie with big car chases and stuff, and this is what we got. And she was not a supporter of that experience. Yeah, no, I think it's a career ender. But luckily, he was already ready to go.
She's an interesting person. I spoke years and years, sorry, this is very off topic, but I spoke years and years ago to Sam Neill about Possession. And I was just like, oh, I'd love to talk to you more about this. And he's like, I will after certain people are no longer with us. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then when Zhukovsky passed away, I was like, are you ready to talk about this now? And he goes, nope, not yet. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're narrowing the field. And then when I recently was reading her Wikipedia article and just where she's at politically, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, she's a little loony. So maybe he's just biding his time for that one. I don't know.
Didn't she check herself into an institution after Possession?
I think she did.
I think she did for a while. Yeah, poor thing.
I think she's very right-wing these days.
I would have so much empathy for those people, if not for the damage that they're doing.
It's just so casual when it comes to knowing the driver is behind all this stuff. There is no, I'm going to find out who did this. There's no cat and mouse as far as that goes. There's no, I'm following the clue. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows that Ryan O'Neal is the guy. There is a little cat and mouse as far as he's just batting him around. Just, hey, I know this. Like, here's the fake key that you used to get into that car. You want this back? Because I found it. You can have it back. And just walks right into his, it looks like a hotel room, but it's an apartment. And then later on, when he checks into a hotel, it basically looks exactly the same.
It was funny when he was handing him the key. The first thing that I was thinking he was trying to do was to get him to put his fingerprints on it so that he could take it back and use it as evidence. I don't know if that was his first thought. And then when he didn't do that, then it was like, let me egg him on more to play this cat and mouse game and take the bait. But that was, I was going like, oh, don't touch it. Don't put your fingerprints on it.
Because it's immediately thereafter that the driver goes to Glasses like, okay, I'm your man. Let's set it up.
There's a strangeness about this, right? There's too much knowledge and there's not enough knowledge. They're just playing this role, right? I keep being inarticulate about it. Did you guys read Animal Man, the comic book that Grant Morrison revived during the Vertigo era when Sandman was big and all that stuff? Anyway, this is a superhero, but there's this episode called The Coyote Gospel that talks about Wile E. Coyote as a sentient being. And he has to wake up every day to get murdered horribly. And it's a terrible pain. And there's like this existential, the comic is like this, where this character is aware of itself as a trope, as a device in a larger machine that is so much older than him. And he's helpless to break out of it. He is the product of it. He can only enact what he's forced to enact, but he does it with a certain kind of resignation and fatalism and self-awareness, all these things that we're all pulling out of the driver as a vibe from it. And I think that's being carried through with these guys like Bruce Dern and Isabel Adjani and whatever. They are indeed characters that feel as though they're trapped in this, and that everything else is just like, there's money in the bag or there isn't. I don't know. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up. I'm going to be a cop in a movie. And you're going to be a bad guy in a movie or a hero, an anti-hero. And you are going to be the damsel that knows too much, the femme fatale. And we're going to do this again. And then after that, we're going to wake up and I'm going to be the cop again. And there's a sort of inevitability of what they're doing. And if we read into a little bit of Hill's sort of interviews around that time, talking about his exhaustion with rewriting, adaptation, writing for other people like Peck and Pod, and he just wanted to do something different. These guys are brilliant. I grew up on this stuff. All the stuff is brilliant. It's all familiar. What if I made a movie that everybody knew what roles they were to be playing? He's the gunslinger, and there's the kid that comes in the end who thinks he's a better gunslinger than he is and has to be taught like a Day of the Gunfighter, Day of the Outlaw. Was that the name of that movie? So there's a sort of archetypal quality to this. And then indeed, Edgar Wright comes in with Baby Driver and does a lot of similar feeling tropes. And to me, it's just, yeah, do this again, Nicholas Rough Drive. Do this again over and over again, because in fact, the point of The Driver is that we are trapped in these cycles of storytelling. The MacGuffin of the movie is a MacGuffin to itself. There's nothing in the bag. It's empty. It's just completely empty. There are other bags in his movies. Extreme Prejudice has a suitcase full of money. Hickey and Boggs has a suitcase full of money. There are all these things that recur over and over again, even in his own work. The Driver is when he's commenting on.
I want to say there's a suitcase of money in The Getaway as well.
That's right.
And it might even be it's been a while since I've seen it, but yeah, it feels like it might even be at either a bus or train station. And I kind of love this whole idea of so much of this taking place, the finale taking place around that bus station. And again, like the exchange man, they call him, with the money exchange, the guy who actually gets away with the money, but then doesn't. The guy who's just there saying, oh yeah, he just picked up the money, he's doing the exchange, the key's gone, this guy's a punk, just reading out all of this stuff about this guy. There's no, again, oh my God, he's going to get away. No, they're on him like flies on shit the entire time.
That wonderful image you have of that Warner Brothers cartoon where they're just punching in, and they're doing this every day. And every day, it's like Groundhog's Day, right? Every day's the same thing. Every day's the same variation on a different thing. Hill is really famous for saying there's only two stories in the Western canon. There's the crucifixion and there's the Odyssey. And everything else is just embellishment, right? And so if this is what you believe, and he's a really well-read guy, he knows of which he speaks when it comes to some of these things. This is, I think, his real moment of existential risk, where he's saying, I'm going to make a movie that is actually a commentary on all action movies, and a commentary on all of these Western tropes of storytelling, and a commentary on Western masculinity in a lot of real ways. But there's that really uncomfortable scene, and I don't know that we're allowed to really use this word flippantly anymore, but it's sexual assault, essentially, of the connection in which a gun is forced in her mouth. It was really uncomfortable and ugly sequence. Even that's recreated in Hill's filmography in Alien. When Ash tries to kill Ripley, he rolls up a pornographic magazine and tries to put it into her mouth. For me, that was always weird when I was a kid in Alien, because I thought, how is he really planning on killing her? Is it choking or is it whatever? But really, later you realize it's a metaphor for sexual violence and gendered violence. And how often does that occur in Hill's films? Fairly frequently, especially towards characters that are as powerful as Ripley or as powerful as the connection is really like Mercy in The Warriors or Ellen in Streets of Fire. These are really powerful women characters that are the only way that men are able to confront their castration before them is in a gendered way. Even that, I think, is Hill reckoning with certain tropes that he himself will continue to enact in his movies as he goes forward in his career. But yeah, here with the second film, he's already taking this unbelievably huge, ballsy swing. It's almost like it's the kind of thing that Francis Ford might do after he sells his vineyards and says, I don't give a crap if people like this or not. I think the driver willfully denies pleasure in a lot of ways. It pushes away the usual easy catharsis. And it says, really examine what it is that you come here for. What is it that you're looking for? What is the resolution that they get away, they get married, they buy a bungalow in the Bahamas? What is it that you're looking for here? Because I deny that. I remember he was brought into the Getaway to rewrite Bogdanovich's script for that. And Bogdanovich's script for that was really faithful to the book, to Harrison. And the book ends in a fantasy hell town where robbers pay to stay until they can't, and then they're cannibalized by the rest of the residents there. And that's the ending of the Getaway. And they brought in Hill to give them something more conventional. So I think the driver really is this working against that. And in a subtle way, he does that for the rest of his career. I have all this capital that I just won from making this 48 Hours movie. What am I going to do now? Streets of Fire. His career is a giant middle finger to expectation and what people want from him.
God, now I tracked down that Bogdanovich script because that's what we talked a lot about when we did the Getaway episode, was talking about that ending from Thompson and just how effed up that was, and how that so many of Jim Thompson's books just take that wild turn towards the end, like Savage Night or The Killer Inside Me. But yeah, so many of his books just take this weird turn towards the end. And when I read the original of The Getaway, I was just like, what the hell just happened? What dimension did we just enter at the end of this book? It's so good.
You were talking about denying expectations, but Bruce Dern has that scene early on where he says, what do you do first thing in the morning? You read the sports section because it's easy. It's like good. It's like win or lose. There's losers and winners. And he's basically saying, here's the most simple, basic outcome that's clear and precise and That's not what you're going to get.
Hill has wanted to do another Thompson novel for a long time too, Pop 1280, Population 1280, which is also really weird. So anyway, yeah.
Didn't they do that is that Coup de Torchon or whatever that's called? I start to speak very quietly when I try to pronounce French words.
Yeah, the Bertrand Tavernier film. It was. Yeah, Yorgos Lanthimos currently owns the rights to it. So we'll see if he brutalizes Emma Stone in that one.
Yeah, I know. I really got turned on to Thompson from Keith Gordon, the filmmaker / actor, because he wanted to do Savage Night forever ago. And it's, God, I would love to see what you end up doing with that, or if you could, because that one is really wild too.
Keith Gordon is one of my favorite directors that people don't talk about enough as a director. That would be amazing. I'd just love to see another one of his movies, honestly. He's amazing, and I love him as an actor too.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be back right after these brief messages. Looking for something superior to streaming? A place with more than 5 times the selection available on all streaming services combined? Check out Scarecrow Video's Rent by Mail service. Select from an unparalleled collection of over 150,000 films and get Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs delivered directly to your door. Get in on it now at scarecrow.com and rediscover the wonders of physical media. All right, we are back, and we are talking about The Driver. And Walter, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your book. How did you come to write about Walter Hill?
For a while, I was running a couple of movie theaters, and I did a screening on 35 millimeter of The Warriors and Streets of Fire's double feature. I loved them when I was a kid, and I thought we're going to get some the usual suspects showing up to these weird screenings or whatever. I like to do them, whatever. Won't make any money. They both sold out within a few minutes of us putting them on sale. And I snuck in the back just to see what the vibe was like. And people were going nuts during the Warriors. They were yelling and laughing and all the right places. And Streets of Fire, same thing. I had flown Larry Gross out, the screenwriter, to talk after Streets of Fire. And we got up in front of the stage as the credits started going. And we turned the music down a little bit. And people cried out in horror that we turn the music down. It's the fix. Closer and Closer, I think, is the closing song. And so we were like, oh, okay. And then we just let the credits play at full volume so people could get the rest of their energy out. And that kind of created kind of a spark in my head of curiosity. What is it about these movies? What is it exactly? And I started doing research, and there weren't any books at that time in English about Walter Hill. I think Walter Hill was dismissed in a way as a maker of bro movies like Red Heat and Last Man Standing. He's working with Stallone. He's working with Schwarzenegger. He's just one of those guys. There's more to it, obviously, in my head anyway. And I started just going down that rabbit hole. Okay, what did he direct? Who is he really? Can we pull something out of watching his filmography? So I went through, I think he had 23, 24 movies at the time. And I watched them all, and I watched the Tales from the Crypts, and I watched some of his TV shows that I could find, Dog and Cat and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, there's actually a lot here. And I'm not sure that I'm the right person for it, but there's no one else doing it, so I'm going to do it. And 7 years later, I finished. And I'd gone out several times during that time to meet with him and chat with him. And he was very open and very willing to help, with the caveat that it wouldn't be a biography of him, and it wouldn't be about the behind the scenes and the dirty stories, which is not interesting to me at all, if you know me. So I was lucky that worked out perfectly. And the first time I met him, he said, I've been warned about you. And I was like, okay, here we go. What movies of mine don't you like? Was his question. And I was like, I don't like Brewster's Millions. I never really understood that in your filmography. And I don't know that I like Crossroads. I hope that you'll give Crossroads another look. And I'm like, deal, I want to write your book. I'm going to give all of them a lot of looks. After writing the book, I really understand Crossroads, I think, in a different way. He made that movie after his father had just died, and his father was a real musical kind of person, and it introduced him to the Southern blues and all of that. Crossroads is really made for him, and about an older mentor and a young man and all that stuff. I get it now. And Brewster's Millions is actually an interesting populist piece in which a person that doesn't even want to be the mayor, the governor, is elected on a platform of burn everything down. So ultimately, the longest chapter in my book is ultimately about Brewster's Millions because it is so prescient in some ways, without being, still not my favorite. But anyway, yeah, I just I knew there was something there, and I wondered, because you can program all sorts of stuff. You can program Class of 1984, nothing about Mark Lester, but you can program a lot of stuff from that era that's not going to get the same kind of reverence and the same kind of full-throated approval and love to today, but by a large audience, a relatively large cult audience. And so I was like, what is it about this guy that we've overlooked and that we haven't really reckoned with? And then some friends of mine knew that I was doing the book when 48 Hours was coming out on 4K, I think. And they asked if I wanted to do a special feature for it. And first, they was, can you send us the chapters? Okay, here's the chapter. And then they asked me to do that. We finished a thing for 48 Hours, a little video essay. And then my partners in that said, this is too good for Paramount. Let's see if David Fincher wants it. Because Fincher was doing something for Netflix at the time. He wanted to do a little documentary series about film critics that he liked and films that he liked. Fincher got a hold of it, and he took a little bit of convincing, not too much, because he had not a great experience making Alien 3 with Hill and Kyler. And I think what might have sold it ultimately, not only that it was done already pretty much, but I said to him, I think the assembly cut of Alien 3 is actually the best Alien film. And told him that, trying to convince him of my seriousness. And it maybe backfired. There was silence for a minute, and he goes, come on, Walter. Yeah, he was really like angry almost at the suggestion, but I kept talking to him about what was really great and what really works about Alien 3, the best version of Ripley, the most interesting version of this world, this blue collar world. And I think at the end of our conversation, hopefully, what sort of moved the ball in our favor was that finally after all that, he was like, okay, let's do it. And so the show that we did for him was on 48 Hours and the sort of endearing nature of its characterizations and racial dynamics. Anyway, I just started writing the book because I felt like there was an opportunity to tell the story of somebody who deserved to get his flowers before he was gone. I think too often we have these great retrospectives like, yeah, I died 20 years ago. Wouldn't have been great if someone said something while he could hear it. And that was really what drove me to the finish line at the end of it. I was like, I want to quit. I'm so tired and we've got so much material and I'm just overwhelmed. But it really drove me to think, but I really want him, whether he agrees with everything I say or not, to know how appreciated he is in his lifetime.
I'm glad that there are movies that take so liberally from some of the things that he's done. You mentioned Baby Driver earlier, and Beth, I think you mentioned Refn. I would throw probably Death Proof a little bit in there, some of the color palette stuff that Tarantino's doing in that. I'm not a big fan of that. Actually, I'm not a big fan of Drive, Baby Driver, or Death Proof, but I just rewatched Drive before we sat down to record this, and it did hit me a little bit better than before, but I don't know if I've ever seen the theatrical version of Drive, because the only version I've ever seen has Angelo Bada's name in the credits. So I'm wondering if that's all temp music, because I don't think he ever wrote a score for it. And I don't think it's Cliff Martinez. I don't think it's the Cliff Martinez score that's going along with it, but it's great music that goes throughout the entire thing. And it is an interesting film. I did like it more the second time, and I do what a cipher Ryan Gosling is in that. And I can really see him being very related to Ryan O'Neal as far as this, like I said, pretty boy, very minimal dialogue. You don't always know exactly what's going on through his head. And some of the violence in that movie is just absolutely wonderful. The thing with the hammer and the scene in the elevator and that opening chase, which for me just pays so much homage to the opening chase in The Driver, and how it ends at that sports game and everyone coming out and him putting on the baseball cap and with that cool fucking jacket that he's got. I can see why people like that a little bit more, but sometimes Refn, I love the bits that of Billy Friedkin just tearing him a new asshole. I thought that was great.
Call a doctor. What did you say? Call a doctor.
I feel like Refn is way up his own ass a lot of times.
I want to throw out one film that draws on Walter Hill, City of Violence, the Korean film. There is a great fight sequence where the two Korean guys have to face off all these local gangs that are totally playing off of the warriors. It's one of the best fight sequences. I love that film so much.
I need to see that one.
Oh, it's such a good film.
I think you really touched on something interesting about Walter Hill, though, is that people in the industry seem to really know him, the movies and stuff. People who are making movies in general really revere some of the things that he does and him. And you see these echoes popping up. He even did the pilot for Deadwood. He did this really interesting miniseries called Broken Trail, in which he allowed his Chinese actresses to write their own dialogue. And it's really about an undertold story all over the West. And so there's so much that when you say about Walter Hill, people are kind of surprised, right? You could say, he influenced this and he influenced this, and he was really into Asian cinema, and he's really into the Odyssey. He would have been my choice to direct the Odyssey. There's really this sort of foundational generation, I think, of filmmakers here and internationally. And he's huge in France, to your point. And so there's a lot going on here, I think. Podcasts like yours and these really smart comments by both of you. And it's really heartening. Something that has nothing to do with me, but I feel justified now spending all this time digging into this and feeling like, boy, this guy just deserves a different kind of conversation.
Part of it, too, is that his personality is not the type to demand attention. Like, he seems like he doesn't need to be in the spotlight. He's very, I don't know, it's humble. He doesn't strike you as this person who's like this narcissist who demands to have attention. He's doing his work. He's a lot like these directors for the studios where they were doing this job and they were doing the best they could and elevating it as high as they could. But on a certain level, it was like, no, it's like, I don't need that kind of extra attention.
You know, and I was always at the beginning, I was a little bit suspicious of that, because a lot of people say that and they don't mean it. They're really like, what do you mean about me? He really genuinely is extraordinarily humble and kind. And you talk to people in a circle, and 201, they're like, oh, yeah, Walter, great guy. That there isn't ever, I wouldn't tell you probably anyway, but I've never really come across anybody who has anything to say about him other than he's genuine. They may not have gotten along with him, but they never felt like he lied to them. He's just a very genuine person. And when he says he's allergic to attention, he is. He ultimately watched that thing that I did with Fincher, and only because his family tricked him into it. He said, they sat me down, they didn't tell me what was going on. He called me after, and he said, they did it. They sat me down and they didn't tell me what I was about to see. And they made me watch the damn thing that you did. And I just want to tell you thank you. And that was it. But he wouldn't get into it. He wouldn't talk more about it. He doesn't like to talk about his stuff. He said that people usually do that when their career's over. And I like to think I got 2 or 3 more left in me. And he's genuine. He's still writing like crazy. He's got 4 or 5 screenplays that he's written just in the last couple of years. He just pitched a new idea for an Alien film to a Sigourney Weaver, and she's on board. And so there's a lot of life in him, and he wants to do more. And I think I hope he gets to. And it's always interesting to see what he's got.
What's interesting at this point in his career, because one of the things about the French New Wave directors, they were all making films late in their lives and making films that were like still breaking boundaries and pushing the envelope. So I'm rooting for him to make a couple more films, at least.
You know, the thing about Hill is you don't have to like his movies, but there's always something to talk about. And I'm not sure that's true for everybody. And I always appreciate that about him.
I don't know if you would consider this a minor Hill film, but for me, one of his best that nobody talks about is Trespass. I fucking love that movie.
It's incredible. And largely, 1992, he's like dealing with new forms of media. He's using surveillance videos. He's using camcorder footage. He's using 16 mil. He's using 35 mil. He's really getting deeply into how, just like Godard did towards the end of his life, but he's really getting into these different new, at the time, 92, new medias and new ways to tell these stories. Yeah, absolutely. Trespass is phenomenal. And one of my favorite movies of his for the longest time was Undisputed, the boxing film that he did with Wesley Snipes. He had Peter Falk. Again, he's dealing with these new stats on each character that comes up, how long they're going to be in prison for. It's like playing with new modes of media. He's never really getting old, I guess, in the art of creation. And I love Supernova as well, which is
Supernova is so interesting, and
so interesting. Thank you.
What a wild story of the making of that too.
And consider this is a movie that was touched by Francis Coppola. He did an edit on it. That was directed by Hill, and then directed by Jack Shoulder, who did one of my favorite 80s movies, The Hidden. So there's all this weird lineage in it, but there's this weird moment where Angela Bassett, somebody is digitally turned into an African American woman, and because there's a sex scene.
Robin Tunney.
Thank you. Yes. So there's a sex scene between Robin and Peter Facinelli that they made into one between James Spader and Angela Bassett. So they had to digitally darken Robin Tunney. It's crazy. It's insane, but also fascinating. The final product is really fascinating. There's an AI in it that is really incredible. It's an incredible AI. It falls in love with the creator, but it's bound by its programming not to help its creator when its creator is being murdered. Maybe I've drunk too deep from the spring, but I'm able to find often right on the surface these really fascinating tropes that bind all these movies together. And they almost always have to do with how relationships work between different kinds of people. That's what these movies are all about. Even stuff that's really hated, like The Assignment, I think was really hated and misunderstood. If you just give it a look, you understand where he's coming from. But another great one is Johnny Handsome. If you guys haven't seen Johnny,
I think I watched that around the time that I was on another person's show talking about Angel Heart, and I was like, oh, let's watch Johnny Handsome as a double feature.
Forrest Whitaker, and it's just this incredible group just talking about what is the nature of personality. Is it and how someone looks, or are you just born with it? And these are just primary issues for Hill all the way back to the beginning of it, the Hickey Box.
All right, we're going to take another break and play a preview for next week's show right after these brief messages.
Kathleen Turner is Private Detective V.I. Warshawski. She's turning up the heat, turning on the charm.
Get to the point, bonehead.
I love it when you talk dirty.
And turning the town upside down.
I am a happy detective. I was a lousy housewife.
You let a broad do this to you?
Kathleen Turner is V.I. Warshawski.
What's that V stand for?
Virtuous.
And the I.
Inquisitive.
Rated R.
That's right, we'll be back next week with a look at a weird one, V.I. Warshawski. Until then, I want to thank my co-hosts, Beth and Walter. So, Walter, what is keeping you busy these days?
I'm teaching film history at the University of Colorado, Denver a lot. I'm working on a few other physical media projects, things like that. I don't know, trying to keep my head above water as the tides are rising.
And Beth, how about yourself?
I'm continuing to work with Film Geek San Diego, just trying to bring interesting programming here to San Diego. And we're in the midst of picking what our theme will be for next year's year-long film series. So that's exciting.
Thank you again, folks, for being on the show. And thanks to everybody for listening. Want to support physical media and get great movies by mail? Head over to scarecrow.com and try Scarecrow Video's incredible rent-by-mail service. The largest publicly accessible collection in the world. You'll find films there entirely unavailable elsewhere. Get what you want when you want it without the scrolling. And of course, they have The Driver available. If you want to hear more of me shooting off my mouth, check out some of the other shows that I work on. They are all available at weirdingwaymedia.com. Thanks especially to our Patreon community. If you want to join the community, visit patreon.com/projectionbooth. Every donation we get helps the Projection Booth take over the world.